And also last week, the International Monetary Fund in its World Economic Outlook for July 2021 titled Fault Lines Widen in the Global Recovery retained its projected growth of 2.5% for Nigeria in 2021, identifying the slow rollout of vaccines as the main factor weighing on the recovery. At its 2021 virtual spring meetings in April, IMF had estimated that Nigeria's economy would grow by 2.5% in 2021 from the 1.5% announced in January. It would also be recalled that in June, the World Bank had raised its growth forecast for Nigeria to 1.8% this year and 2.1% in 2022. Now, the central bank expects the economy to grow 3.15% in 2021, and the federal government sees a 3% growth. How feasible are these growth projections? We are being joined by the Chief Executive Officer of CFG Advisory, Tilewa Adebajo. Good morning, Mr. Adebajo. Thank you for joining us, and Happy New Month.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chimeze.
Good morning. Well, the IMF has reiterated their views that 2021 growth for Nigeria will come in at 2.5%. In view of the surge in insecurity and the disruption to the supply chain logistics in Nigeria, do you think that these projections are feasible?
Yes, I think indeed they are feasible, and I think that has been factored into it. The central bank is projecting about 3% growth. So while the economy is growing, I think it's a positive development. But it's important to realize that this is positive growth, but it's growth that is below the rate of population growth. And what the growth that Nigeria needs now to lift it out of its current situation is about 6.5% and above on a sustainable basis to get us out of the poverty trap that we're in, and also our debt cycle.
Now, over the last 48 months, according to the EIU, the average rate of inflation in Nigeria was 13.4%, while other countries with CCC rating had an average inflation of 5.8%, and Sub-Saharan Africa was 4%, oil producers 3.3%. Now, what does this data tell you, and what can we deduce from this data, bearing in mind that the maximum level of inflation in the CBN target is 6 to 9%, while the official headline inflation today is 17.75%.
Well, I think the problem with inflation is very well documented. The key factor driving inflation in Nigeria today is food inflation. And we understand, as you said, with the disruption in the supply chain, the insecurity in the northern part of the country, which is also a very significant use of the breadbasket for Nigeria. So these are the challenges we've had. On top of these challenges, I think we have ways and means financing also that is putting inflationary pressure on the system. So between food prices going up and the ways and means financing, these two factors are what is sustaining a high rate of inflation in Nigeria today.
Now, you talked about for Nigeria, considering our population growth, we should be looking at 6.5% growth. Now, policy is important if we have to achieve the kind of growth that we are talking about. Now, part of the decisions reached last week by Central Bank to stop allocation of forex to BDCs is seen as one policy that will fuel inflation further. What is your take on this decision, and how much impact do you think that may have on price index and even job creation?
Well, let's understand this. The impact of this is zero. The central bank has said very clearly that they put $7.2 billion a year into the Bureau de Change market. So it's not as if the central bank has withdrawn $7.2 billion out of the foreign exchange market. They have just changed the channel. So the supply of the dollar is still the same. So what you see now is speculative panic buying. Eventually the rates will readjust. So the net change of this is zero, because it's not as if the central bank has withdrawn $7.2 billion out of the foreign exchange markets. No, they have just changed the channel. They have changed the channel for that supply from the Bureau de Change to the banks. So as far as I see it, the net effect of that will be zero. What you're seeing now is speculation. People are going to readjust, and eventually the rates will find their level. But I think what is important, and I think what this has pointed out, is the fact that there's a need of convergence in rates between the parallel market and the I&E window. So I think it's important that we develop a dynamic I&E window. We develop a strong interbank market so that we can, and also the banks should be able to simplify the process of applying for foreign exchange. We should be able to do this on an internet platform. Scan your documents into the banks, let them verify it, and let's put a seamless process in place to apply for foreign exchange. If you converge the rates, then I think you'll see a lot more impact on the economy. But the divergence of the rates presents arbitrage opportunities, what a lot of people call round tripping. So you need to close the gap between the official rates and that parallel market.
Now, the major problem in the FX market is the unavailability of foreign exchange to meet demand. So how does this policy solve this problem? And if you were in the shoes of the central bank governor, how would you have handled this?
Well, like I've said before, you need to create a central system. If it's the I&E window and an interbank market whereby everybody goes to buy their foreign exchange from the banks, you can go online into your bank, open a dumb account, your BVN and all your identification has been verified, put your documentation into the system, get registered as a buyer of foreign exchange online. And once you do that, the demand is an issue. There's a certain amount of foreign exchange that the central bank puts into the system every year. But also don't forget that there's about between $25 to $30 billion that comes in from the diaspora. It is these funds also that we need to push in an attractive manner towards an interbank or an I&E window. If we can find that, I think that everybody will find their levels, and I think there should be enough supply once we remove the red tape and the bottleneck, especially for the diaspora funds.
Now, you did mention that this doesn't change anything because the central bank has not stopped the amount of forex that it brings out. Instead, they channeled it to the banks. But if you did listen to our report, I'm sure you heard one of the analysts there talk about also the challenges in the banks, that the banks are also abusing the system. How would you react to this?
Well, like I've said, what the banks need to do is to put in a seamless process to apply for foreign exchange. The central bank itself also has a responsibility to address this issue because why are banks hoarding this foreign exchange? And some people are accusing the banks that they're round tripping. So the banks the central bank has to force the banks to be able to open up in terms of transparency and accountability. I think there was a time where banks used to publish all their allocations in the newspapers. For me, it's not necessary. Let's just get a seamless process in place whereby there's a transparent bid and offer system and we know what exactly the amount of funds are in the system. If you do that, as with everything else in other countries, then you create one single market. It is the inefficiencies of the banking system to be able to process this FX that has resulted in the creation and the expansion of the Bureau de Change markets. But we need one market. We don't need two markets, and we don't need the distortion in two rates. So that convergence and that single window market on a seamless manner is very important. It's not a big deal. I can scan my passport online to the bank. I can register my details online. The bank already has an account with me. My BVN and all my signature IDs are all in the bank. So if I scan in my passport, I scan in my ticket, or I scan in my school fees, bills, or whatever I need to process, the bank should be able to process that money for me and credit my account without me going to the bank. And that's what we need to do.
Now, for most part of the year, the external reserves have sustained the downward movement regardless of the development in the crude oil market. Why are we not seeing the positive impact of the oil demand recovery on the reserves?
Well, you can't see that impact because, first of all, last year, the federal government spent 97% of its revenues to service debt. The NNPC itself has told you that they're having revenue challenges in terms of putting money into the federation account, and that is as a result of the subsidies that they're paying on petroleum products. So there's still a few distortions within the economy, and the structural reforms that we need to make, we haven't made them. So if you don't make those structural reforms, most of your revenues will end up going towards debt service, and that is why there's a challenge with the ways and means financing. So government really needs to stop the ways and means financing, because it's a contingency finance. It's not an everyday type finance. And these are the challenges the government has. There's a need for structural reform on the fiscal side, because that is really what is dragging the economy down.
And we have seen significant reduction in FPIs and FDI in the country. What can be done to restore confidence?
Well, confidence is the key word. And if the structural reforms in your economy are fundamentally wrong, like people see you are using 97% of your revenue to service debt, the Chinese are even beginning to have some concern about extending additional debt to Nigeria because of our debt profile. A lot of all these things are what people see, that the structural reforms that are needed are not being carried out. So people take a look at your balance sheet, and they take a look at the insecurity in the country also, which is the biggest challenge we have in Nigeria today. Who wants to put in their money in a country that is not stable? So there are consequences of all the security issues that we see. And the consequence is what you are seeing that's been reflected in the low numbers of FDIs into the country. The petroleum industry bill, which is a key sector of the economy, is something that has not been passed, and it's been struggling with that for over 10 years. So investment in the oil sector has also gone down. In 1977, we reached 2.5 million barrels of crude oil per day. Today, we're not able to pump out 2 million barrels a day. This shows you the lack of investments in the oil industry. So these are the challenges that we have in terms of the structural reforms and the security situation that does not allow the right amount of foreign direct investments to come into Nigeria.
All right, Mr. Adebajo, a quick one before I let you go. The second quarter GDP data will be released on August 26. Many analysts are of the view that it will be as high as 4.5% because of the base year effect. Please bear in mind that in second quarter 2020, GDP growth was about minus 6.53%. Now, do you share the optimistic view? And if not, why do you differ, and what do you think the growth estimate will be? Also note the PMI, which measures the health of the manufacturing sector, has been declining in the last 2 months. Usually, the PMI is a forward-looking indicator of GDP growth.
Well, thank you very much. I think what is important that I must say is that we're always pleased by positive GDP growth. Because we know that at least at that point in time, the glass is half full because you're seeing growth. But I think it is important because looking at the medium-term economic framework, which defines where the government is going, I don't have confidence in that document at the moment. We also need to also define the fact that our GDP must grow beyond our population growth rate, which is between 3%. So if our GDP is growing at 3%, there's nothing to celebrate. We have over 100 million people in poverty. And the challenge in Nigeria is that we need to set ourselves the standard. The standard is that our economy must grow at least 6.5% to be able to sustain a population of 200 million that we have. If our economy is not growing at 6.5%, then we know that there's some challenges that we have. So I think, yes, positive economic growth without a doubt in the second quarter, but we need to see what policies are we putting in place to look at the structural reforms. If you ask me today, the biggest challenge we have is not GDP growth. The biggest challenge we have is our debt profile. And there's urgent need for structural reforms and to be able to reduce the ways and means financing and to sustain our debt levels, which is now at about 40 trillion naira, which is questioned, which is not sustainable. So the debt profile and the fiscal side is the key challenge for our economy today, not GDP growth.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us this morning. Thank you, Mr. Tilewa Adebajo.
Good morning.
Thank you. And after the break, we look at some of the corporate earnings posted at the Nigerian Stock Exchange last week. Do stay with us.